接下来，请国立阳明交通大学林奇宏校长与医学院王署君院长主持，并邀请 Dr. Kirsten Ostherr 演讲，主题为通讯医疗与健康人文。Coming up, we invite President Lin Qihong of National Yangming Jiaotong University and Dean Wang Shujun of the School of Medicine to chair the session. We are also honored to welcome Dr. Kirsten Ostherr for her lecture on telehealth and healthcare humanities. 让我们欢迎林奇宏校长、王署君院长以及 Dr. Ostherr. Let's give a warm welcome to President Lin, Dean Wang, and Dr. Ostherr.
好，非常谢谢，因为刚才林校长又演讲又 chair， 所以我这个代替他。Dear esteemed guests, hello everyone. It is a great honor to introduce our distinguished guest from the United States, Professor Kirsten Ostherr from the Rice University. Professor Ostherr is currently the director of the Medical Humanities Research Institute at Rice University, and also holds the Gladys Louis Fox Professorship of English at the university. Her professional experience is very extensive. She has led the Medical Future Labs and the Medical Humanities program for years, dedicated to promoting the interdisciplinary research among medicine, technology, and her research areas digital health technology, artificial intelligence, visual culture, and social and cultural studies, all of which have had a profound impact on the modern medical field. Professor Ostherr has also received numerous honors, a long list, and including the current, just this year, the Health Humanities Exemplary Award from the International Health Humanities Consortium, which showcase her leadership and contribution in this field. Today, she's going to delve into the development of virtual health and its social-cultural significance. I believe Professor Ostherr's insights will provide us valuable perspective in this field. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me and welcome Professor Ostherr.
Thank you very much. It's a real honor to be here today, and I'm very grateful for the invitation to address all of you. I'm especially excited to be able to follow the previous speeches that touched on the role of humanity in engineering medicine, in engineering biology, in the future of AI. So I'm going to focus on what that looks like within the broader realm of what I would call virtual health, and specifically touching on telehealth in that and AI as well. So I would like to speak about the field of virtual health, which began to emerge with smartphones and the mobile web starting around 2007. This is the first smartphone that was debuted at that time with the launch of the Apple iPhone. But virtual health has been a dream of technologists in healthcare for decades. This talk will discuss telehealth as a modality of virtual health, and I will consider the technological, social, cultural, and ethical dimensions of the growth of this field of healthcare. So I will touch on a bit how I'm defining telehealth in relation to virtual health, some of the social and ethical issues related to telehealth, and then most importantly, in my view, how telehealth might help increase the humanity of healthcare. So first section, defining telehealth. So virtual health is a trend. Is a trend in most high and middle income countries. It's also a site of cutting-edge technological innovation. It's a cost-saving measure. Sometimes it's seen as a strategy for extending the reach of limited healthcare resources, whether that's for providers or hospital beds. And it's also seen as a technique for potentially increasing health equity by democratizing access to technologically advanced care. Now, I want to distinguish between virtual health, which is the name given to the use of digital tools for the purpose of providing healthcare to patients or improving the health of people outside of traditional medical settings. While it is sometimes used as a synonym for digital health, virtual health specifically names the intentional use of digital devices to connect and provide care to patients remotely and asynchronously, and those are very important features as you'll see in a moment. Whereas digital health names a range of devices and software used to deliver virtual healthcare, whether remotely or in person. Telehealth is an example of digital health and a modality of virtual health. So this is the key question for my presentation today. What happens to the humanity of care when no human being is physically present to give or receive it? So when care is delivered asynchronously, two people are not there at the same time, and remotely, they're not physically co-present. What happens to humanity? Is there a way to preserve the humanity of care in that setting? So the increasing automation of healthcare that virtual health represents raises concerns about dehumanization, discrimination, inaccuracy, privacy, security, and liability. As healthcare providers, you will likely offer your patients access to virtual health as an alternative to in-person care. And you may already be offering this to your patients, and your patients will have to choose their preference if they have a choice. One question to consider is whether they should have a choice. As healthcare professionals and adopters of emerging technologies, you will have to decide when and why you find value in these offerings, and you will have to develop recommended best practices related to telehealth. When is it the right choice, and when is it not? The general public will also encounter all kinds of stories, both good and bad, alarmist tales and miraculous tales about the consequences of turning our health over to what is sometimes considered robots instead of doctors. That's sometimes the worry. And healthcare professionals will need to be able to provide a clear explanation of what is and is not possible with virtual health. In particular, in the context of emerging AI tools, which are attracting growing media attention, including especially in the domain of healthcare applications, clinicians and patients will benefit from guidance on how to think about the role of high-tech tools in healthcare, from virtual health to telehealth to AI. When we consider it seriously, the idea of virtual health might seem to be an oxymoron. How can the care of the physical body, with its dependence on food and water, its need for warmth and touch, and its vulnerability to injury, its sensitivity to the surrounding environment, how can that be reduced to the exchange of disembodied digital signals? Yet healthcare systems throughout the world have embraced a wide range of digital health tools, including many listed on the screen right now, and others. Telehealth, remote monitoring tools such as EKGs and pulse oximeters to be used at home instead of in the hospital, wearable sensors, virtual reality and augmented reality, video games, chatbots, mobile apps, websites, and AI, of course, powered by ChatGPT, which is increasingly finding its way into all of those connected devices. These devices feed a worldwide data stream that becomes an archive of healthcare interactions, enabling widespread adoption of simulated forms of care and increased construction of data subjects in the place of patients. These are the recipients of care then. As we move further into virtual healthcare, we become more dependent on digital screens and data sets, and these screen-based processes inherently alter our relationships with medicine, our doctors, our bodies, and ourselves. Okay, so moving now from that into the broader social and ethical issues related to telehealth. So virtual health is a logic of healthcare and a set of business practices that are rapidly transforming the ways that people around the world experience care. This logic of care understands health through quantitative data analysis, emphasizing aspects of illness and wellness that are easily sensed and counted by computational devices, while excluding other forms of human experience. Those that are not easily quantified don't make it into virtual health. Okay? So many members of the general public find these practices both novel and disconcerting. And many physicians, nurses, and other healthcare professionals also find these developments both helpful and potentially dehumanizing. Okay, so I want to explain briefly some of the most prevalent debates about ethical issues in telehealth. And I'm just going to lay out 4 poles of debate. One relates to a sort of utopian versus a pessimistic vision of where this is leading us in terms of care. Another is about the idea that virtual health might lead to more democratization of access versus increased inequity. Another debate is about whether virtual care will rehumanize or dehumanize healthcare. And finally, a debate about whether virtual health enables us to see patients and their experiences through the lens of illness or through the lens of disease. So first, let me talk about techno-utopian and techno-pessimist. This may be in some ways the most familiar to many people. These viewpoints could be considered 2 points of debate in general about the introduction of new technologies into healthcare. This is just a form of debate that we've heard many times with new technologies over decades and decades. To generalize, techno-utopian views are often aligned with the ideal of technological innovation as a solution to systemic and political problems, regardless sometimes of need, cost, or evidence of effectiveness. It's just going to make it better. That's sort of the generally optimistic view. Techno-pessimists often believe that healthcare is already too technological, and that what is needed is a return to focusing on the doctor-patient relationship as an ideal. I would argue that neither goal is sufficiently responsive to all of the pressures facing healthcare today, as well as all of the opportunities that are afforded by new technologies. But these views are widely presented, especially in the media, and they shape a lot of public response to new technology development in healthcare. Okay, another really important debate in this field centers on democratization versus increased inequity. This centers on the long-term societal effects of the movement toward digitization in healthcare, and certainly AI is a central debate in this area right now. Proponents of virtual health often argue that these tools will reduce costs and increase access to care by scaling up the capacity of human providers to care for more patients. So in this context, providing care asynchronously and at a distance would allow fewer providers to care for more patients, thus addressing the concern over a gap in the number of providers that we have available to care for aging populations. This then is a digital extension of the reach of the physician. And so it is argued that in this case, virtual health will democratize access to healthcare because it will allow more people to access care than would otherwise be able to. In contrast, others argue that access to digital health innovations will only be available to the most affluent and healthiest patients, not only because they can afford access to devices that they might need to use at home. If you remember that list, those are all devices that people are expected to have at home in some way in order to get virtual care, but also because they have access to doctors at elite academic medical centers who are early adopters of emerging technologies. In this case, investments in virtual health may drive increased health inequities, not democratization. So that's the central tenet of that debate. Now, for rehumanization versus dehumanization, here too, this is a debate that has existed for a long time in medicine in relation to the introduction of new technologies, and viewpoints about the effects of virtual health on patients' experiences of care tend to split over whether the tools will allow doctors and patients to reconnect with their humanity or further dehumanize the entire clinical encounter. And I want to emphasize that this debate does focus on the humanity of providers as well as patients. So the question of the effect of technology on the doctors who are using it is central to this debate as well as that of the patient. So the idea of rehumanization is that virtual health tools will save time by automating tasks that are labor-intensive, thus freeing up physicians to spend more time with patients doing the kinds of human things that patients most value, such as engaging with them with empathy, which right now we assume that robots cannot do, although that is a site of debate, and I would be happy to talk about that. The opposing view posits that if digital tools increase a physician's efficiency, the time savings will be used to squeeze more patients and more tasks onto their clinical schedule, rather than extending the time spent with each individual patient. So in this case, virtual health might further dehumanize rather than rehumanize healthcare for the physicians and for the patients. Okay, the last pole of debate here centers on the illness versus disease models. This model references a divergence that has been documented in the research on how doctors and patients understand sickness. This model presents the physician perspective as focused on the pathophysiology of disease, wherein something is wrong with a specific part of the body, which needs to be isolated and repaired. In contrast, the illness model presents the patient perspective as focused on how being sick impacts their life and wellness as a whole, and how they will manage this disruption of day-to-day activities and priorities. In the paradigm of virtual health, the disease model may become more prominent as digital biomarkers are designed to look for signals of pathology or malfunctioning bodies, rather than looking for some sign of holistic wellness, which would be difficult to assess computationally. On the other hand, virtual health aims to gather an ever-expanding array of multimodal health-relevant data, including from sources that would not be considered medical in any traditional sense, sources from outside of clinical settings, which we can access with mobile sensors. So the long-term vision for this approach is that all of these data sets would power a general medical AI that could process and interpret data on a full array of issues ranging from physical to mental health. From this perspective, it is theoretically possible that virtual health could enable a movement toward a more holistic illness model that sees the interconnections between data derived from social life activities and data indicating the presence of illness, which disrupts daily equilibrium. So finally, let's move to how the humanities can help us address these issues. In the midst of all of these debates, In the midst of all of these debates, we are at an unprecedented moment for innovation in healthcare through digital health technologies. Telehealth is promising to bring care to patients who are isolated due to disability, geographic location, or access to transportation. Virtual and augmented reality promise immersive therapies for pain and mixed reality next-generation surgeries. AI-powered medical scribes and chatbots promise to alleviate the burden of documentation, which is often pointed at as one of the key sources of dehumanization of physicians, and allow doctors to reconnect with their patients. Yet there is widespread concern among patients and ethicists that these new technologies may erode the humanity of healthcare by inserting more machines and computational interfaces in between doctors and patients, reducing the human presence that is so vital to healing. Under the telehealth paradigm, which patients will have in-person access to physicians and which will not? If we acknowledge the history of medicine, public health, and biomedical technologies as all being shaped by the same access to innovation that have shaped different societies around the world, then we do need to grapple with the implications of those legacies within our healthcare systems and technologies. Medical humanities can help with this process by providing knowledge of our history, interpretation of cultural approaches to care in diverse communities, understanding of the mechanisms of inequality, analysis of how those effects may play out in healthcare today, Awareness of how and why patient experiences and the stories they tell about them provide information that cannot be accessed through physiological measurements, and creative interventions that can help us provide alternatives to make healthcare and society more equitable and inclusive for all. Will these technologies be distributed equitably? Whose interests and values will determine which innovations come to market and take hold in medical practice? And what role, if any, will patients have in saying whether they find telehealth a healing form of care? Telehealth raises a set of philosophical questions that relate to the larger aims of the healthcare system and its providers. Some research shows that even while telehealth boomed during the COVID pandemic, overall access across the population and up and down throughout society did not increase as greatly as we would have thought. And the overall demographic of telehealth users did not expand as dramatically as we would have thought. If those findings are generalizable, this raises a major question about who benefits from virtual care and who is left out or harmed. In addition, widespread feelings of burnout among healthcare providers became acute during the pandemic and persist in many settings. And researchers have linked this condition to a feeling of dehumanization that is often associated with two factors related to telehealth: persistent deep inequities in the healthcare system and the growing use of technology in healthcare. So I ask, what future of care do we want for ourselves and our loved ones? Do we prefer in-person care, and if so, at what cost? Should we pursue technological innovations if we know that they will only benefit the most privileged members of society? But also, is it true that virtual health will only benefit the most privileged members of society? All of these questions present lively sites of debate that require the medical humanities to engage with technologists and healthcare providers in order to answer them. We, as members of society and as leaders in medical humanities, will need to grapple with the implications of the shift to virtual care. Is it possible to imagine a future of virtual healthcare that is as good as in-person care and is accessible and affordable for all people? Is it possible that virtual care could help reduce healthcare inequities? Are there circumstances in which virtual care might be better than in-person care? Is it possible that futuristic technologies such as the tricorder from the television series Star Trek could be invented to advance the capacities of virtual health? A Qualcomm tricorder X Prize competition with a $10 million prize ran in 2016 and 2017 to pursue this exact goal, but the reality has not come to fruition yet. The future of digital health will need to reckon with the often misaligned ideals of technology development, capital investment, and other payers and regulators, as well as the priorities of healthcare providers, patients, and advocates. The question of whose values and voices will guide the future development of virtual health will influence how the field develops and its impact on the quality of care for years to come. Thank you very much.